Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session. I'm very honored, thrilled, and quite nervous to talk to you today at Dev Days. I'm happy to have been invited. Thank you to the organizers. And I'm pretty honored that you are willing to spend the next half an hour with me. Probably you've read the little leaflet, the little teaser, and thought, well, that might be entertaining, the story she has to tell. And well, I hope that's definitely what I'm going to provide you, a bit of entertainment. The title of my talk is Love at First Language. Actually, I have to admit right away that that is cheating a little bit, because talking about JavaScript and why I think that JavaScript is an excellent choice to begin with programming, and that might make you think that JavaScript was my first programming language that I started to learn. That's actually not true, and you're going to hear which language I tried to learn first in just a few minutes. And actually, Love at First Language is just the title that's written down in the leaflet, because the real topic of the talk is how I fell in love with programming, which is a pretty personal story, and that just felt weird to have that written down in the leaflet. So yes, I'm going to tell you how I fell in love with programming, which happened in my case pretty late in life. And starting that story, actually I have to start with the real beginning, which is where I come from. And that is that beautiful town that you see here pictured. It's in Germany, south of Germany, in the Black Forest. It's a beautiful area. If you ever want to travel south of Germany, that's the place you should go. I actually grew up in the house where this red arrow is pointing to. And I grew up in a house where up to now still there is no computer. My parents are totally offline. They know what the internet is, but they don't use it. They have no computer. They don't have a smartphone. They don't even have a mobile phone, actually. My siblings are using computers now, but they only use it at work as much as they have to. My siblings were non-gamers. My brothers were not into gaming at all. I had neighbors' kids that had a C64, where I saw how what gaming with computers is actually, but I never got into it. I'm born in '75, so it was the pre-internet area, definitely. And I grew up relatively offline. The time where I came into contact with computers was actually when I started to study, and I studied medicine. I wanted to study arts first, but that somehow didn't work out. I was not creative enough, so I somehow decided, no, I want to go for medicine, and I did. I didn't only study, I also worked as an MD. It's actually not fake, it's really me, quite some years ago. I studied in pediatrics, child medical care, and then after a while, that would be a story of its own, just believe me, after a while, after some years, I transitioned into neuroscience. It's also me, having a cap of EEG electrodes on my head. I was working in several labs, research labs, where we did exciting experiments with human beings, mostly ourselves, sometimes also patients. And that was really exciting. We did behavioral studies. It was exciting for most. We even did some studies on children. I can assure you that that little fellow was really happy to join. He's the kid of the guy in the white suit there. And definitely it was an interesting time. It was interesting topics that I had to deal with. But what I was mainly doing, the work that I was doing, was dealing with huge amounts of data, of course. And as you might imagine, there programming came into play. But not real programming for my case, because I was not educated. I had not been learning programming. The way I approached these huge amounts of data was actually using Excel. And that I knew how to do by someone had taught me a bit. I created these huge tables of very complex tables that only I could get, and sometimes I even forgot how they worked. But they gave me the answers that I needed, but it took me a lot of time. And while I was dealing with Excel, as many others in the field did, I had these programming-capable colleagues. In each lab that I worked, there was this one guy or girl who was just able to script and do data analysis by MATLAB, basically. That was the software that was mostly used in my environment. Maybe some of you saw the talk of Verena yesterday. She would have been the person that I approached and was really trying to get at, as many others did. So they were writing these analysis scripts. What I needed weeks or even months for, they just answered me in some days. If you had a different question to your data, they were just changing the script, and it was fantastic. So I got fascinated by what they were able to do, and for the first time, I kind of realized what power there is in programming and what beauty there is, and I started to like the logic. I also started to understand how these scripts work. I was able to adapt some of them, but I was never able to write it myself. So basically, I was standing there astonished, jealous also of those colleagues that were able to program, and came to the conclusion that's definitely something I want to learn as well. That was about 2011, I would say, and I was searching for courses online for MATLAB. But instead of finding MATLAB courses, somehow, another story for itself, but really that was the way, I was Googling for MATLAB courses, and what I stumbled over was HTML and CSS courses. I know that's not programming, I know that's rather coding, but I just started and fiddled around with it a little bit, started to create some little boxes and move them around on the screen, and was fascinated by how easy that is and how I'm able to do that. And that started just like a little hobby, and I couldn't get my hands off. And well, 4.5 years, almost 5 years later, this is now where I am. I'm an employed front-end developer now in Frankfurt, working in an awesome startup called Wamo, awesome team. And probably you're still asking yourselves, well, how come? She studied medicine, she worked in medical business, did some neuroscience, I even published several papers. And now I'm a front-end developer. Why the hell would you do that? Well, it is a long story, and I'm going to tell you the story. In my case, that had a lot to do with Rails girls. How many of you have heard of Rails girls in the room? Quite many. I'm happy to hear that. I know they exist in Poland as well. Awesome people. I know some of them. Rails girls, I stumbled upon in 2012, I think. I was getting into web development already. I had done these HTML, CSS courses, was fascinated, did a little playing around in my free time. And I stumbled over that announcement for a Rails Girls workshop in Munich. I was living in Frankfurt at the time already. I saw this announcement. I said something like, well, learn how to program an app in just a weekend. And I thought, wow, that's cool, learning how to program an app, and I actually thought it was an iOS app. I didn't know that you take the term app as well for just web apps. I thought I'm going to go there and learn how to program an iOS app. That's true fact. So I applied, I got taken, I traveled there, and what Rails Girls actually do is free 2-day workshops for total beginners, and it's addressed, well, the name might make you think that, to women and girls. And some coaches, voluntary people, are there guiding you through a little app, guide, and help you build a Rails app with full stack. You hear about GitHub, you use GitHub, it feels like programming, but of course it's copy pasting basically, but it gives you the real feeling of it. And just some more words on Rails Girls in general. It's a voluntary community that actually started in Helsinki. Some people just had that idea that it would be awesome to have more women in the field, and offered this kind of workshop. And it was like infectious after a while, this idea of offering these workshops, spread it all over the world. And basically the reason why that happened is that Rails Girls did not only open source the guides to create this little app and everything, but also the guides to host an event like that. So everybody, if you in the room now decide, well, that's an awesome idea, I want to do that too, you can just start, read the material online, and go and host an event yourself. And it's a fantastic experience, really. All the materials are online, and that's what I went to. So they really welcome total beginners, like I was at the time. Again, I think 2011, I'm not sure, 2011 or 12. And me, I was going there with my little laptop, didn't have that many stickers on yet. I went there and I started programming, it felt like. I didn't know at the time that my laptop has a program called Terminal. I've never, ever opened that thing before in my life. And there I was sitting, feeling like a real hacker, and yeah, felt awesome. But in the end, of course, I didn't learn how to web code in 2 days, but what that Rails Girls workshop did to me was that it encouraged me to take an obsession that had turned up really seriously. It helped me overcome a fear that I might be too late or even not smart enough to learn that stuff. And it set the idea that that might actually be something that I would like to do professionally. So I went home, was sitting in the train, literally, and it was clear to me that I want to learn programming, but I definitely want to learn web programming. And as I had just been at a Rails Girls workshop, the thing I went for was Ruby on Rails. I went for it like really the hard way. There's actually a tutorial, probably some of you know that. It's called Learn Ruby the Hard Way, and I did that thing from beginning to end. I even learned test-driven development. I started with test-driven development. Imagine, I have never done anything like that before. And I've definitely learned a lot in that time, but what I did not learn was to manage my frustration, because I was totally on my own, and I got lost very, very quickly. I got lost in tons of words and things that I thought I needed to know, Googling up, and you just hear about things that you don't know where to put. It's vocabulary that you never had heard before. Gems, Git, testing, brew, I just put whatever came to my mind. All the Rails stuff, it doesn't mean anything to you when you have never been in that world, of course. And you think everybody else knows it, but it's just you who doesn't know. And but there were many times where I just table flipping and yeah, thought about, well, what the hell? I mean, I have an education. I can just go and continue doing that. But somehow it just didn't stop. The fascination didn't go away. I was still doing some little projects. I'm going to show you some later. And Ruby, Rails definitely was not the thing for me. So of course, question was, so what then now? Do I stop? Do I give up? That definitely was not an option anymore at that point. So the question was rather, do I choose another language? And when I asked around a bit, I call it some random counselor, it doesn't matter, told me it really doesn't matter what language you learn. They are all the same. You just choose one and then you go for it. I was even thinking about doing PHP, learning PHP, because I had started to work with WordPress, of course. There were tons of friends that said, oh, well, you're into web development. I would like to have that little site. Can you do that for me? And I was trying to adapt WordPress templates and, of course, stumbled over PHP. Yeah, so that was a counseling, but some wiser counselor told me, or asked me rather, well, think about what you really want to do. What is it you want to do? And if you really think about doing that professionally, if that's something you would want to do, think about what do you actually want to work with. And that is an easy question for me, because I just mentioned that in the beginning. I had a fling for arts, for design, but I'm not really the creative type of person. I see something and I can say it's beautiful, but I cannot create it. But if someone tells me, well, I have this beautiful design here, this is the website I wanna have, can you build it for me? If I'm then allowed to be the one to tackle with the mechanics for it, that's just heaven for me. That's when I start dancing, that's when I'm happy, and actually that's where I am now. So what do I want to do? That question, it's easy. I want to become a front-end developer. So just to have the timeline back, that was about 2012 then. And I started to get into JavaScript. Finally, JavaScript comes into play. Finally, this love story starts. And I claimed in the beginning that I think that JavaScript is a good choice for beginners. So why do I say that? JavaScript, it was said in this room just I think an hour ago, it's easy to start with because you see results pretty quickly. You have the visual feedback. You can just go to your web browser and start doing things. It's just the thing to learn nowadays if you want to do web development, front end at least. And it is still a programming language, so it has all the basics. It has arrays, strings, objects. Everything is an object, I know, in JavaScript. It has if, else, for, whatever. So you really can learn basic programming with JavaScript, and I still think it's fun. There's no need for complex environmental setup, at least not if you compare it to Ruby on Rails, which was my little detour before. I would say it's not that easy anymore if you want to seriously do something with JavaScript nowadays. There is some environmental things that you have to think about. And there are tons of resources online available. That's true for many languages, that's clear. So when I went for JavaScript, I heard kind of experienced programmers say, well, JavaScript, no. It's a pain. It's so unlogic, it's eccentric, it's weird. Don't go there. And I was, well, why? I didn't get the point. And sort of the answer to that, well, go away from it is, or what people told me was that, well, JavaScript shares concepts common to other languages, but some things it just does a bit differently, and that seems to be weird for seasoned programmers. I got an idea of that when I approached the concept of scope. So what is scope? Pretty sure all of you know. I tend to forget. So I just wrote down how I put it in my words. It's a set of rules of where and how a something can be looked up in a script. For variables in JavaScript, I remembered it the way that they are in scope from the point declared to end of function declared in. For functions, they are in scope throughout their encompassing function. So what I want to do is go through a little testing with you, testing variable scope in JavaScript. And I'm actually going to show you some code. I would never ever dare to have a live demo, so this is screenshots, or at least the thing on the right is a screenshot, the left is just pasted in code. And bear with me, I would like to go through it. I know it's basic stuff, but the assertion function that you see on the left is just taking into arguments a value and just a string as an argument. And what it actually does is just it tests for the value, and if the value is true, it passes a CSS class to a list element that is giving it a green color, and if it's false, then it's going to be a red list element. So the thing you see in the assertions on the left. On the right, sorry, is just testing the whether true is true, easy thing, and testing whether false is true, which is returning false, of course. So you have a red and a green statement. That's the basis of my little test suite here. And what I actually do now here is having a little script. It's a function called outer that has a nested function called inner, and several variables. They're all strings, the variables, and the assert call now just takes in or asks what is the type of outer, which is a function, so that statement should return true, and then passes in the string that is behind it. And same thing for inner, so if the position, these calls of assert are in scope of the call, that should return a green line, and if not, it should return in red. So running the script, no big surprise. First of all, it does the console log. Just below there, that little variable C is logged out in the inner function, and it also has these little 2 lines in red and green. So no surprise. If I, at that position in the script, test for outer, it's going to be green, it's in scope, and the inner is not in scope because it's nested inside the outer function. So the point of that whole testing is now also testing for those variables that are strings, so it should return true if at a position, blah, blah, blah. I'm repeating myself. If they are at a position where they are in scope, if I run it from that position on, they are red, not in scope. Basic thing. So the point now is to move these 5 lines just within the function, within my little script, and if I move the assertions within the outer function, running it at that position, is returning me the 2 functions in green. They are in scope, but the 3 variables are not, because they are not declared yet. And if I move it further down below the A statement, or the declaration of A, then A is going to turn green. If I move it a bit further down below B, B is going to be green. And moving it within the inner function now returns still the functions in green. They are in scope at that position, and also the variables. But C is not declared yet. It's further down in that if statement that is below there. Moving it within the if statement, still not. We are not below the line where C is declared. Moving it below that variable C, all of a sudden everything is green. So all is in scope at that point. The interesting part now, at least that's what people tell me, and of course I find it very interesting as well, is if you move it out of that if block, but keep it within the inner function, what do you think happens with C? I'm pretty sure people here know that. Is it going to be green or red? So is it green? Who thinks it's going to be green? Who thinks it's going to be red? At least there are some that are thinking it that way. So it's green because the if statement is not ending the scope in JavaScript, and people tell me that is weird. I just learned those rules, and to me that's not weird at all. So if I move all the stuff outside, again we have the state of the beginning. Only outer is in scope here. Moving it back up is redundant now. It's going to be the same. So anyhow, that is just a tiny little thing. Of course, very kindergarten style, I know. But I need those things to keep learning those rules. And some more var rules, it's a bit redundant, but well, the things I remembered is that var is in scope of its near and parent function. And scope lookup direction is from within the nesting to outside. And other blocks than functions, like if statements, don't end scope of var. But wait. Some of you in the room might think, what? Some might even be, well, okay, what is she talking about? Because var, hello. It's 2016. There's let and cons. There's ECMAScript 6 now. And what the hell is she talking about? And well, exactly, what am I talking about? I was just starting to feel kind of comfortable with JavaScript when ECMAScript 6 came along. All of a sudden, everything was written differently and everything looked like Chinese again. And I thought, well, I'm never going to have stable ground under my feet. Yeah, the frustration came again. And I was jumping around like that little munchkin here. So remember, and I have to tell myself that pretty often again, remember I started at 0 some 4 or 5 years ago. I was starting with tutorials, stuff you find online. I went through the HTML, CSS, Sass, and whatnot. I did start with JavaScript after the detour with Ruby on Rails. And I built these first sites for friends and family. That one is actually still online. It's a hairdresser, good friend of mine. She's the best hairdresser in the world. Payment for that job was haircuts, and was really fun. What I did was I faded out that logo, the head, and well, I faded it to be smaller, and I was just feeling like a hero when it worked. That was one of my first projects. You can see, well, just pasted the code. It was jQuery. Super easy thing, of course, but for me that was fantastic at the time. I even had given IDs still that were a mixture of German and English. Another project for a friend who is a book cover designer, and it was a WordPress template that I built myself. I added a little slideshow in there, JavaScript. When it worked, I just danced around the table. I went for books, I went for tutorials, I did stuff, but the thing is that you can learn as much as you want. The thing that teaches you is experience. And also remember, I was still working as an MD at that time. I was basically into research. I only rarely saw patients, so that is also kind of cheating. I wore a white coat sometimes, but mostly I was in the lab with data and stuff. I had reduced my position at university to a part-time job because I liked the other stuff so much that I wanted to have more time for it. In the same time, I also started to organize Rails Girls workshops with these awesome ladies on the right, left, whatever. They're all women in tech, like myself, and we're a little team in Frankfurt, and we did organize Rails Girls workshops. We will continue to do so, and it's the greatest fun. So if you really if you think it's a good idea, go for it. It's really the best thing you can do, or join others that already offer it and go there as coaches if you do Ruby on Rails. We organize events. We organize workshops, talks, and whatnot, basically for women in tech to just show more women in the field and make that show that it's a really attractive field and that we love working in the field now. And while organizing these events and also working more or learning more, I got to know a culture that I really hadn't been aware of before. I learned that coders can be or are mostly helping, teaching, volunteering, spreading enthusiasm, and that it's a really cool world that I missed out completely. While working on organizing these things, I got to know quite many coders in the area, and I also got to know my now CTO, Benjamin. Hi. I was trusted by him, but also by others that I'm really committed and eager to learn. And even though I was a real beginner, still I got offered a job as front-end developer in 2014, beginning of 2014. And that was the time when I jumped, actually. I left medical business completely. I resigned, and no one could understand, of course. And I didn't regret it a second. I'm still very much enjoying working as a front-end developer. I'm enjoying working in that team. And not the least, maybe because there are GIFs in that world, because MDs don't know anything about GIFs. So as you might have guessed, I'm a GIF fan. So that was about 3 years ago. And as I said, I'm really enjoying it a lot. We even some months ago we have started to build stuff in React and Redux, which is awesome, just to prove you that actually we're having React code. Doesn't mean anything, but that's actual code from our database. But the point I want to make is, yeah, I am building, I'm part of the team that builds a React and Redux app right now. But I feel like that cookie monster very often still. I even feel that my eyes are twisting like he's there, because I love cookies and there's a huge one on the plate. But it feels like, well, just overwhelming. How can I ever eat up that huge cookie on that plate? And there's another one and another one and another one. And the feeling of I can't do it, I just can't, it's too big, comes in circles and comes in circles. But fortunately, there are the small ones on the plate as well. There are the little tiny cookies, and they are delicious as well. And I'm pretty able to eat those up now. I'm capable of doing that. I'm also able to get bits and pieces of the bigger cookie. And well, yes, if I learned one thing, it is that frustration definitely comes in circles, and learning web programming is not easy. Like people tell you in the beginning, it's easy and so fun, and go for the tutorials and you can teach it all yourself. It's not true. First serious starts, the very beginning, it's easy and fun, yes, but the first serious steps are really hard. And hearing every once in a while from a seasoned programmer and your teammates or whoever surrounds you, that frustration stays, and it stays hard, even for if you have a long time experience. But so does the fun. It really, really helps a lot. So that was my little story, long story. I thank you for listening to it. I think I was pretty fast. Not sure you have questions, but if you have any, just go ahead and ask. Sure.
So, when you organize the talks in Frankfurt, are they in English or in German?
So the question was whether talks that we organize in Frankfurt are in English or in German. Sometimes they're in English, sometimes in German, depends on what speakers we have. And you should not imagine that as a super professional thing. We have people from the area mostly. So mostly it's in German, but we announce the events also on Meetup. And Meetup is an awesome thing. And of course it attracts international audience as well. So if we usually ask whether the speaker is comfortable to give a talk also in English. And if there are several people that do not speak German that well, we have the events in English. And the Rails Girls events we usually do in English, because there are quite many, at least non-German speaking attendees. Yeah. Sorry. One after the other, don't worry.
Through your adventure through learning programming, is there anything
Not there's tons of things that surprises me every day. Every day. The things that well, basically, I'm always surprised when I get something, and that coin drop moment is just the best thing on earth. That unfortunately still surprises me that I get things which shouldn't be that the case anymore. That is something, but probably you want to know something more particular with related to JavaScript or whatever. There, no. I mean, it's stuff that you learn. It's definitely, it doesn't surprise me now that I know it, but I wouldn't have thought about it in that way before going through that experience. But you can't learn that stuff on your own. You need people around you that are helping you to do it. And Brian Holt said yesterday in something in his talk when he talked about teaching and empathy, that if you teach, it's important that you value, or that the purpose while you're doing it is that you want to help the student or whoever you're teaching to learn more, and to not want to show off how smart you are and how much smarter you are than the student. And that puts it in very good terms, because that's actually the thing that I value most with the people that I am surrounded with, that I feel they are having fun teaching, and they are not those persons that need to show how smart they are. So it makes you feel less stupid, which you feel anyhow if you're a beginner all the time. Yeah, maybe you first in the back, and then it's you.
Have you done any open source contribution? And if not, what would it take to make you start contributing to open source?
So the question is whether I personally have contributed to open source projects. I haven't. What would it take me? More experience, I guess. So up to now, I built little sites, which were small projects. So they're out in the world, visible for everyone. So that's not open source, I know. But and apart from that, I have only worked so far in huger teams that are companies. Actually, it's a code that is not open source. No, I have not contributed yet, but I have been at least a coach at Rails Girl Summer of Code, and the teams in Rails Girl Summer of Code, if you don't know what it is, you have to read it up. It's an awesome project. The teams that are taken as Rails Girl Summer of Code teams, they are working on open source projects, so maybe indirectly eased it a bit, but no, I haven't. Now you.
You mentioned the frustration a couple of times, and when I was trying to help people out with learning programming, I found that they either got blocked and frustrated, or get frustrated and then blocked themselves and kind of progress about it. What would be your advice to how people kind of unblock themselves and really like go for it and try things out? Because like, some people feel that this is within your reach. I ask you to do it, and people are like frustrated enough that they can't.
I have several recommendations that I constantly tell myself, reminding you all the time that you have gone through that already, and that you have made the experience that it vanishes, that there is that point where you get through that particular problem. And if that doesn't help, then slice up in smaller chunks and go for smaller parts. I also heard the advice of my CTO to, if you get too much into frustration, allow yourself to go back to comfort zone. So go back to something that you know how to do, and get back that feeling, well, okay, I can do stuff. I am productive. I'm not a total loser. I'm not a waste for this team. And get back on that for a while. So eat the smaller cookies for a little while. But it's also important, I think, to not stay and not only do that and always keep on that thing, but go for or seek for the frustration also, and repeatedly show yourself and prove to yourself that you can overcome it. But go for smaller parts. That's probably the best advice. In many ways in my life, I would say. But for programming, I'm not sure. I think part of the decision to study medicine was that I sort of, I like logic, and I have a sense for natural science, and I don't know, I think that goes in that direction. So maybe admiring logic and getting something out of that, getting some sort of thrill out of logic, that helps, which has not really something to do with medicine. I think you can be totally unlogic to still be a good doctor. No, just take that out. That was not what I meant, but I think you got the point.
So you said that there was a point where you could modify the scripts that people were using. Was there any point in time where you could apply programming knowledge and actually do like the data mining that they were doing programming?
You mean when I went into web programming already and going back to... interesting point. I've never thought of it. I've never tried it again. I know that's probably the part that is not understandable if you're not me. Why being interested in learning how to analyze data and being in research and saying that is a nice and awesome field to work in, and then still go for web programming, that's kind of weird. But there were other reasons to that, of course, as well. It's academia, and I found out that that is not really the world I want to spend the rest of my life in. So I haven't tried it. Probably, I think I would understand those MATLAB scripts a lot better now, and I might even be able to write one, I think. Yeah.
Can I carry on with this question? So what are the benefits of working in industry comparing to academia or the way around?
Oh, I'm a bit scared to answer that now live. Or, well, I mean, being recorded. No, well, no. Yeah, well, no, I'm fully behind what I'm gonna say. Academia is exploiting people in some parts. At least you're kind of asked in the medical field, you're asked to go for your medical education and work in clinics and do the research in time that you really have to steal from that other time. And many go for that by working at evenings, nights, and private life is practically it's not impossible, but it's impaired, and you have to be willing to pay that price. Working for a company, of course, there's also not a 9-to-5 job usually, but it's a bit different. That is not a particular academia problem, or, well, no, at least I also came to know biologists and physicists and whatnot, and basically they are all more or less saying the same thing. You have contracts that sometimes, I had colleagues that had contracts for several months only. They didn't know whether they would be employed afterwards, so yeah, that goes in that direction, I would say. Any more questions? Okay, thank you.